Okay. Tongue. That's it.
Satya, you can chair the session, introduce the speaker.
Okay, can I start?
Yeah, your voice is loud and clear.
Um, so, um, it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce my friend Ravi Rao, Ravi A. Rao. Okay, and um, it's an honor to me, and I'm not used to honors very much. Okay, but see how well I can do. I'll do my best. So, you see, title of the talk is Some Approaches to a Question of Suslin. And his current affiliation is Narsimanji Institute of Management Studies, Mumbai. And mm, in any case, Ravi is my friend from Tata Institute. He spent almost his entire career in TIFR, which is my favorite spot. I mean, TIFR changed, but it's still I have the same memory and it's still my favorite spot. And Ravi joined a year before me, and he was a great support to me. We had many walks on the seafront, ocean front. I mean, I did not have any mentor. It is friends like Ravi who supported my career by giving me invitations to TIFR and conferences. And I'm very grateful to him for all this support. I mean, so Ravi,
Yeah, go on. Now stop.
no, I have to say a few things about you. I mean, you have been Ravi has been a leader in projective models and classical K theory. He proved many results, okay, and he will speak on one of them. Let me put a little bit humor. I would say he proved so many great theorems, even he forgot some of them. So, in the recent past, I needed an analog, quadratic analog of Lindel's theorem on extendability of projective models. Okay. So I thought someone would know. I asked around, nobody knew, including Ravi, and nobody could give me a reference. Then I proved it myself. Okay, and I took the credit in my first version of the paper, and after I proved, Ravi said, no, it should be known, it is known, and Ohangaran proved it. So I checked Ohangaran's publications, okay, and Ohangaran, there's nothing like that. And eventually, referee wrote actually, he or she searched, and then pointed out it was proved by Ravi Rao. Okay. Okay. So, in any case, one more thing I would point out about Ravi, I mean, value of pure mathematics is being questionable, okay, in current situation. And at this stage of my career or our career, I wonder how would we be remembered? Okay. The answer I come up with is that what kind of students, who are the students that we trained and supervised? Okay. Ravi made significant contributions in this regard. He supervised at least 5 students from, officially, and he helped many, many more students whose supervisor, he was not the supervisor, but he helped them. I checked, from MathSciNet, he wrote joint papers with many younger mathematicians. Okay, and so So, I admire him for this, I mean, I think this is something will be there, whether somebody reads your results or not. I mean, anyway, I mean, that's something I admire, and he helped everybody, he's very helpful, he tried to help, okay? With that, I will, it is over to you, Ravi, okay?
Okay. Thanks a lot, Shotya. It was great to know you. And you forgot to mention that you proved a theorem in my room with Raja.
Okay.
That I remember that very much. You all did ask me, but I said nothing doing. You people are working and I'm just sitting around. Anyway, it was great to have you, and we had many meetings, and I think we will continue to have a few more. Even if I am not there in TIFR, I can always come to TIFR. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's not a problem, because either I'll be without a job, in which case it's easy to come, or if I have a job, it's okay. I can still come. Yeah. Now, I'd like to thank the organizers for two things. One is they luckily, as was in the history, and still consider K-theory as part of commutative algebra and invited me to give a talk in this. It is very much
I agree with you. K-theory is part of commutative algebra.
Yeah, very much a part of commutative. Right from the beginning, from the way MR numbers are given also initially, you will see that K-theory was part of commutative algebra, and you will see how much commutative algebra has influenced my thinking. It has been completely commutative algebra which has pushed me, a bit of quadratic forms, and a bit of my colleague's expertise. He's the real expert on various other A1 homotopy ideas and bit group ideas in more details, Grothendieck bit groups. So those things have come together in a very nice way in this problem. Okay, I was always a great follower of Suslin, okay, one of my heroes, right from his PhD days, and his ideas I had learned. Whereas my colleagues, Swan was the one who would give us counterexamples, Galois, very easily. I will not talk about it, but I have written down that counterexample which he gave, which you all can later see, because Jugal has made a nice arrangement of which you can keep all the, all our talks, recorded talks are kept somewhere. So he can keep it there. So you can see that afterwards. Swan gave the counterexample which put us in the right direction in this problem. Okay, I had a very simplistic argument in my mind, and Swan told me that will not work. Okay, with Swan it's always like that. I am very positive. I say I can do this, and he says no, it cannot be done, and doesn't tell me why my method doesn't work. So that is also nice in some ways. Now, Asal and I, we met in UCLA. I had gone to meet Mercurev for a different problem, and he told me to meet Balmer, and Balmer was actually the right guy, but Fasal was with him. He recognized me because he had visited TIFR and told me, I have found the obstacle. What is the obstruction for this question of Suslin? So I didn't let him proceed. I told him that's not an obstruction. Try to prove that is zero. He said, how can that be? I said, look, I have recently with Pratyusha and Rabaya proved in the 6 case. You want something in the 4 case. Agreed, 4 case is very different from 6 case. But in 6 case, if I can prove it is 0, then I think it's 0 in 4 case. And true enough, in 15-20 days, he rang me up and told me, and that was expensive to ring up from the Switzerland. And he told me, yes, let us write the paper. But I said, no, this is not the right way to do the problem, in my opinion. And I had already told him in UCLA itself what is my idea of the problem. So there are 2 different ideas I have. I will describe those ideas today. And told him that that is the way we should pursue the problem, not the way you have done it. He, of course, being from the Wangaran school, Barge school, was a quadratic forms person. And he used a lot of quadratic forms and ideas from quadratic forms. I have written it down, but I may not go into it. But you can have a look at it afterwards. Okay? So let me begin with telling you about what the problem is. This is the well-known inverse Laplace problem. You all know the Laplace problem. The Laplace problem what is the Laplace thing? If you take the first row of a invertible matrix, call it say A1 AN, then it always has the property that there are elements B1 Bn such that sigma AI Bi equal to 1. Because you just take even sigma transpose inverse to be B1 Vn, then the dot product is 1.
Ravi, can you increase the size a little bit?
I don't want to get into that. Okay, I will try. I will try because there's one control. Yes, yes, this is maximum I can do.
This is better.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there is one more thing which Selby can do, but I cannot do it. So I'm not going to do it. Okay. So you have got a row is said to be unimodular. If this type of thing happens, you have got a vector V, that is the row. And if you have got another vector W so that the dot product is 1, then we say the row is unimodular. Right? Same thing as saying that the ideal generated by the coefficients is the whole ring. Okay. The question in K-theory, one question is, if you have got a unimodular row over a commutative ring, can you complete it to an invertible matrix? Okay. And in general, of course, it is not true, as we shall see in a minute. But very often for important rings, it could be true. And there is one important ring which Suslin told me is one of the most major theorems remaining in classical K-theory, and that is the Bas-Quillen conjecture. Bas-Quillen conjecture says that if the ring is Rx, where R is a regular local ring, that was Bas, or it can be any ring, we will see, with some conditions, then every row, unimodular row, is completable. And this problem has been done to some extent in large number of cases, especially if the regular local ring contains a field. But it is still open. Suslin himself tried it in the dimension 3 case and did not, he got it in dimension 3 case, but not more than that. Okay, Lindell got it for the affine rings, local points of a affine algebra. Okay, regular local points, non-singular points. But then beyond that, it was done later on by Popescu. So this problem has been a very important problem and has been done in several cases. But it is still not complete. Now, of course, when n equal to 2, size is 2, you can always complete, no problem. And if n is bigger than d plus 2, where d is a dimension, then again you can complete by what is known as general position argument. So this general position argument is a contribution of commutative algebra coming all the time. In fact, if you see in 1960s to 67, 68, under the influence of Bas and Serre, it was general position argument which was ruling. Okay, right up to you go to Eisenberg-Evans, 1972 or 73. Eisenberg-Evans is possibly the maximum general position argument type of things, which was done by basic elements. Okay, that was the maximum. After that, it sort of started petering down because they made it so complicated that people got afraid of it and stopped doing it. So general position stopped, and at that time Suslin came into picture, 76. In his thesis, he introduced what I will tell you about, the factorial rows. The rows in which one coordinate is a power of a factorial power. Okay, a certain factorial power depending on the length of the row. So he came with that, and that changed the scene dramatically and led to the present problem. So we will come to that in a minute. And that is why things started changing. Up to d plus 2, everything was fine. D plus 1, what happened? This started to be questioned, and this was mainly due to Suslin. Again, one had to choose a good ring which to work with. So one good ring was the polynomial ring. Commutative algebraists can work with the polynomial ring and try to see even today whether these questions are valid and can be done by using pure commutative algebra, a little bit of linear algebra, and a little bit of group theory. These are the ingredients required. So the counterexample in the d plus 1 case is your usual well-known thing. I would find it difficult to often give another example in an easy way, though there are many examples, to write it down so explicitly. So this is the unimodular row xyz over the sphere S2, Rxyz mod x square plus y square plus z square minus 1. Okay, this particular row represents the tangent bundle, and so it can be shown using the Harry-Ball theorem that this cannot be completed. So D+1 case for general rings, answer of Laplace inverse problem is false. You cannot do it. Okay. Anybody has any doubts about that? No, but I have taken reals. Okay. If I took complex numbers there, then it is completable. The real numbers come into the picture, and so that is a field in which you will notice that -1 is not a square. That is the defining thing for that real numbers, and we will see how that influenced thinking in this problem also. You require that -1 to be a square for things to work. Okay. So first case, D+1 case, Suslin took a deeper interest in that problem. Okay, he worked over affine algebras over algebraically closed fields because complex numbers were good. The -1 was a square. Of course, he didn't think of the -1 being a square in his arguments because they were much larger and not confined to one vector. So what he said, let us take a row, unimodular row of length D+1 over an affine algebra of dimension D. Okay, this is the first case where it is not obvious that it is completable. And his idea was to prove it is completable. In his thesis, young child, okay, 25 or so. So he did what any commutative algebra person would do. Take this row, change, do elementary operations on it. What else can you do, right? But then you can do something. In commutative algebra, you can make the height comes into the picture. So you can make the height of the ideal A2 AD plus 1. Once it is a unimodular row, you can make the height of that ideal to be quite large, to be D minus. I have removed only one, so I go modulo D dimensions, and so A mod this will become 0 dimensional. Now, if I can always assume it is a reduced ring right from the beginning, or I can take reduced now. If I take reduced 0 dimensional, then it is a product of algebraically closed fields. Therefore, every element is a power. Any power you want, m, provided 1 upon m is in the ring. So if 1 upon d factorial is in the ring, you can always do it. But if it's algebraically closed, you don't even need that. You can straight away take the root, okay, of d factorial root and still manage to do it. So you can get a vector whose first coordinate is a factorial power. So it's of the form a0 to the power d factorial a1 ad. Yeah, I might often change my notation. From a1 I have become a0 here. Excuse me for that. Anyway, and such vectors, Suslin's beautiful theorem, and one theorem which clearly stands out as an idea of commutative algebra. Again, who else would think of rows of a0, a1, a2 square, ar raised to r, that type of rows? Commutative algebra. So when you do sequences and all that, you play with those things. So Suslin showed that these vectors are always completable. Okay, that's his fundamental theorem. And Tate is supposed to have remarked that he also had thought about it but didn't know how to prove it. And Suslin has done it in such a simple way that I have even taught it in a BSc class in a college. Okay, they had a little difficulty, but I managed to do it. I only proved a small bit of what he had done. So the beginnings were quite simple, and then Suslin decided to go one more step. He said, this algebraically closed made things easy. Can I remove that condition? But he was very careful, man. He didn't take any field. He realized any field like real numbers creates problems. So he took a C1 field. Okay? So that some equations can be solved. Like you see, C1 permits you to be able to solve certain equations. Okay? So he took the last step till the last step. But now if you go to the last step, you can't take a root. So you're stuck. You don't know what to do. You just have a unit. You don't know what to do. So Suslin realized that he should not go to the last step. He should go one less. If you go one less, you go modulo a3 ad plus 1, then you get a curve. Okay. And if you take a curve, and if you have the original variety is smooth, then you can also make this curve smooth by means of Bertini. So either you use general position as in commutative algebra, or you use Bertini as in geometry, which is using hyperplanes and cutting sections. And then you can always get a curve which is smooth. Now, that's why Suslin, if you see, his proofs are always either the variety is smooth to begin with or normal. He is sometimes able to extend it to normal. He never took a general variety. Though later on it was found that whenever we took the smooth case and knew it, then we could extend it to the general variety quite easily. Okay. So in this case, it was Parimala who mentioned it, and we wrote it down in one of my papers. I've written it, Pandakalan. I wrote it down. Okay. Now you have this curve. How can you do some divisibility? So here he found that SK1C, SK1 of the curve, is factorial divisible. And here he used cohomology to give that argument. Actually, those arguments, if you see, were already there in a non-cohomological method in Bas-Milner's set. Okay, and he did it using cohomology, and using that and the factorial completability, he could manage to prove his theorem that all the curves A1 AD plus 1 over a C1 field are completable. So this was the idea of Suslin, and this is what I took up as the main hint. Okay, I could either follow Bas-Milner's cell and try to use non-cohomological arguments. Okay, but they did use some number theoretic arguments also in that way. Anyway, I was discussing this with Jean when he told me he had a counter example, how he knew what the obstruction is. And I told him that we should do exactly like Suslin did and go to the problem and revisit it. And I told him about it, where we should do it. So let us see the case which Suslin suggested. In his Helsinki talk in the ICM, 1978, he said you should be able to do the size D unimodular rho over a smooth affine algebra of dimension D. Mark Suslin always says smooth, but doesn't always think it is very much rigid. Because usually the non-smooth case comes quite easily from the smooth case. Okay. So I said, let us follow Suslin. He went up to 1 less and stopped and got a curve. What happens if you go 2 less and stop? Let us stop at 2 less. Then you get 3 remains. If you minus D minus 2, then D minus D minus 2 is 2-dimensional. Okay. So you have got, sorry, somewhere I missed something. Size D, and you go 2 less. I think I should go 3 less. I made a mistake here. It's a 3 less because I want a 3-dimensional object to come. No. Yeah. So, okay, let me say you could go 2 less also and work with it, which we did later. But initially, I had not been able to see things clearly when it was 2 less. Okay. Later on, when we resat and did it after doing the other case, then we also did the D minus 2 case, going down modulo 2 D minus 2 case, where some symplectic arguments come into the picture. You know, Suslin, one of the ways he had proved it is he had shown that the curve SK1 is the same as K1 SP. So the symplectic group comes into the picture quite naturally in Suslin. And that was bothering us at that time. Later on, we managed to avoid letting it bother us and managed to do it. Okay, so but then that I started the D minus 3 statement. The reason being that if you do, then you have got a vector of length 3. And we have to study vectors of length 3, which I had been doing all my life. Okay, so vector of length 3 by ideas of Wasserstein were related to a Witt group. Okay, and there was a nice Witt group which we discussed. Only thing is Wasserstein discussed Witt groups over 2-dimensional rings, but now we had a 3-dimensional ring, and we got a smooth threefold. by using Bertini, because the original variety was smooth, you could get a smooth threefold. Everything is okay so far? Somebody say yes. Jugal?
Yeah, everything is
Yeah.
perfect.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Not too fast, right?
No, it's fine. It's fine with me.
Okay, good. Now, once you have this smooth threefold, what do we do? So again, Suslin gave the idea, right? Suslin said that object which you get, try to get a cohomological interpretation. Why do you want to get a cohomological interpretation? The thing is, cohomology can be used to show that it is divisible. Because by cohomology, one can get a lot of exact sequences to play with, a lot of things become available, and using that, one may land up being able to show that it is divisible. And that is what you want. You want that the group should be divisible, then you can go back to your factorial root in that group, and from that you can play with it and get the factorial power row in the row. So our idea was to, how does one get, now here I skipped a bit. I said from the group, you could go to the row. How do you go to the row from the group? So that was the Wasserstein symbol, but Wasserstein was in dimension 2. So we had to prove something in dimension 3, which was luckily already done by me and Van de Kallen. Okay, that if you have got a smooth threefold, then you have a nice group structure on it, and that's a Witt group. Okay, that means basically the Wasserstein symbol from Um3T mod E3T to WET, this is a bijection. Okay, and this gives the WET is a group. So this gives a group structure on Um3T, not E3T, in 3 dimensions. So once you have that group structure due to this identification, one had to use cohomology to show. I will come a bit more about that a little later and tell you how one did it. Okay. Now I want to consider, in a way, it was a request of Anand Sawant that please tell us a little more than the paper. Okay, what we have been doing. Now, I couldn't do too much of that, but I can give some hints of what we are trying. And maybe you will again realize how much commutative algebra can play a role. See, there are now 3 or 4 ways on which you can proceed. One is we can proceed using good commutative algebra, which is what I have been trying, okay, for a long time. I tried it with many people also, help of many people. For example, I tried it with Fasal, I tried it with Sagar, okay, and we tried to see whether things could be done. But he quickly said it's difficult and got out of it. So, pure commutative algebra and ideas of Reutemann help us go further. I also asked Swan about it. Okay, so there are some ways of doing it. If you ask Swan, of course, he will go to topology and do it quite differently. Okay, he has a knack of doing things via topology. Then you can use cohomology. There are certain steps which you can use cohomology to try and see whether it can be done. The basic strength we have, why we are doing it, but it has taken so long, is that we have always seen that the non-singular case comes when the singular case also comes quite quickly. Not too long, maybe 1 year later, maybe at most, if one thinks about a singular case. So here also we expected that, but now almost 10 years have passed and we have not got it so far. So I suspect that we are just missing something. So any of the youngsters here can keep their eyes and ears open and maybe help us solve this. All right, I think this is the last bit remaining actually. One bit remaining, either one cohomology piece or one commutative algebra piece, which is remaining to solve this problem. Of course, I am not looking at the quadratic forms method, which some people are doing. Okay, after Fasal's first proof using quadratic forms, there are people like Panin who look at it from that angle also. But most of the time, in the singular case, they are stuck. Singular case is really algebra, really commutative algebra. So I will describe to you some things in the singular case which we can do, but also tell you why it is not the optimum way. It's a good way, but not an optimum way. Okay. So, yeah, good. It's in the next page itself. So I call it a K1 theoretic viewpoint for unimodular rows. So for singular case, I am going to do something in the K1 level. So what do? I realize that this is a key point. Unimodular rows are much easier to study than projective modules. This was realized by Seshadri, right? Remember, for the Sayre's problem, it was Seshadri who started everybody on the unimodular row. Youngster thinks in the most simple way, and he felt unimodular rows are the right way to study. So he studied unimodular rows. Okay? And same way here, Susin started with unimodular rows. Did not talk about projective modules. So in the introduction and all that, he writes vector bundle, which really surprised me that he did that. Anyway, so what does one do? You have a unimodular row, A0, AR. Take a general unimodular row. All unimodular rows can be thought of as you got a cover. You invert A0, then the vector can be elementally completable. You go invert 1 plus A0, then A0 becomes in the Jacobson radical. So you can go modulo A0, there it is elementary completable, so it is elementary completable. Therefore, you can always get a 2 cover of the space, okay, on which the vector is elementary completable. What is the idea? The idea is that can I take these 2 covers and come to the intersection, that means the ring R, A0, 1 plus A0R. Can I come there? What do I get? I will get something like 1, 0, 0, sigma. It may not be 0, 1, 0 star sigma. It may be star also. And this sigma is a one-stably elementary matrix. Now, if I could split that sigma, okay, if I could split that sigma as sigma 1, sigma 2, okay, or alpha 1, alpha 2, I've written alpha 1 plus A0, beta A0. So I split it. This is a square you have got. And you split it one part in this corner and one part in that corner. Then you can patch the initial 2 maps. The initial 2 completions can be patched to give a completion of the vector. The whole idea is, can you take this one-stably elementary matrix and split it? So it is a very similar idea to the idea of Quillen. Quillen did this in the Sayre's conjecture. He got certain automorphisms can be split. Not all, but certain automorphisms. But he was, luckily for him, or motivated by him, that motivated him, was that he was working over a polynomial ring. And in a polynomial ring situation, he showed that everything is homotopic to the identity. So if the situation is that the matrix is homotopic to the identity, okay, Quillen pointed out, you have got something which is homotopic to the identity. That means you have got a gamma t, which is gamma 1 is the sigma and gamma 0 is identity. That's the homotopy. Then you can always split. So this was the major contribution of Quillen, and this is the major example. Okay. If you ask me what is the proof of Quillen, I will just say Taylor expansion and leave it to you to figure out that. It doesn't read immediately like Taylor expansion, but if you see the proof, he is just using Taylor expansion. Okay, I leave that to you.
Ravi,
Yeah.
isn't in Plumstead paper, isn't it Quillen's thing that
Yeah.
Plumstead made worked?
Yeah,
Okay.
Plumstead. Same.
Yeah.
Plumstead used Quillen. Yeah. Plumstead is 1980. After Quillen, 76. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
So that is what was one of the famous contribution of Quillen. 2 things. One is local global principle, and one is this splitting lemma. These are the 2 main things which Quillen did. Okay, in his short note of 4 or 5 pages, which changed the subject, which had been hanging for 20 years. That's the problem with mathematics. Now, if I say 10 years, I feel it is nothing, because it takes so much time for even simple steps. Okay, so I just have this one-stably elementary matrix, and I want to know whether it can be split. Of course, if it's an elementary matrix, you can always split it. For example, if it's an elementary matrix, then you can say it's homotopic to the identity. And because it is homotopic to the identity, we have just seen that homotopic biquilism split. Or you can directly prove it also. So the elementary matrices are fine. But when it is one stably elementary, everything changes. Okay. In fact, I have so many notes with me on one stably elementary stuff that I should publish it sometime. But I'm never getting a complete result, which I like. So it just gets pushed. Okay. And of course, it's a fact that you can never always split. Why? Because any unimodular row, you had this patching into two elementary parts, and you got that one stably there. Now, if you could always split it, then all these unimodular rows would be completable. But we know that there are unimodular rows which are not completable. Therefore, you cannot always do it. So there might be some conditions under which it can be done, and that there is some study of elementary stably elementary matrices by Van der Kallen. Okay, it gives you some direction of how to study these objects. These type of studies are also done by the Russians a long time back. Wasserstein's papers also give you interesting information about these matters. And I won't go more into that topic, which is a subject by itself. Okay. So over special rings, Van der Kallen and I tried to see whether one could do something. And that was the ring we got, was from thinking about Suslin's work. Projective modules over C1 fields of top rank which are stably free are free, right? Thinking about this, we said, what about the matrix version? What about the K1 version of this result? Can one prove the K1 version? So I had written up some notes there. I remember those days we used to have those long papers on which we used to print. What was it called? It was called something. We didn't have the nice slick version now. And I had that version and I gave it to Van der Kallen, which I had. And then it was unbelievable. He sat on it, did not look at it at all for several months. And then there was a meeting they had in Europe. They have every year, they have some meeting. And he didn't have anything else to talk. So he remembered this and pulled it out and did a beautiful job. That paper is written very well, and it is written by him. Okay, he took my notes, of course, and many things came out of that. But he simplified some of the arguments. In fact, he simplified the arguments to a good extent that I could write another paper later, much later, in which I showed what is better in my approach. So I wrote two papers on the same topic, but it was the other approach of mine turned out to be quite useful because I could write a little more information, which my method, which was horrible look at, did give. So Van der Kallen I wrote that paper, and this is what we proved. We proved the K1 version. K1 version means what? You take a matrix, stably elementary matrix. Okay. Now, stably elementary matrix, if you are a classical K theorist, you will know that size d plus 2 onwards, if they are stably elementary, then they are elementary. This is a beautiful first observation done in Bas-Milner's set. Okay, it was done for very different reasons, connected to the congruent subgroup problem, which Bas wrote in that paper. Okay, but they, of course, assumed various things in that proof, and they wrote it. But later on, it was realized that much better things could be done, and Wasserstein was the leader in that direction. So he also calculated the pre-stabilization kernel and worked on that and wrote many things, which later on Van der Kallen simplified further. Okay, but still, all people all think only of the Wasserstein level. They don't think more than that. And Bas's proof, Bas-Milner square proof, was written in a very elementary way, but was not the best possible. They did not get D plus 2. They got D plus 3. Okay, it was Wasserstein who got D plus 2 when he rewrote it in a proper way. And what we did, we said if the affine algebra is smooth of dimension D, then it should not be D plus 2. It should be D plus 1. Why? Projective modules, it improved by 1. Because projective modules, if the size was, the vector was of length D plus 2, then it was always elementarily completable. But if it is D plus 1, then it is not. It may not be completable, but he proved it is completable. So why not the same way you must improve? Now, therefore we tried that, and we found that we could show that the one-stably elementary matrices of that size were homotopy to the identity, from which we could get that if it is smooth, by using results of Lindell and Forst, we could show that it was elementary. So this is how we improved it, and that helped us to understand how does the Witt group look. So the Witt group, the Witt group we could do in dimension 3, that the Wasserstein symbol was an isomorphism. That is what we got out of that. That WEA, which I wrote there, WET I wrote, WET is actually the sort of called a space which tells you the unimodular rows of length 3, how it looks. So we got into our hands the first step which Suslin had directed. Go to some quotient, go to some nice quotient, give a cohomological interpretation for that quotient. Before that, you must give some interpretation of that quotient and then give it a cohomological interpretation. So the first step had already, of course, we didn't realize it at that time, but slowly we realized that, okay, this is the first step. We have got an interpretation, we have got a Witt group interpretation. Unfortunately, Witt groups by themselves were not quite enough. Okay, one had to do a little more than using Witt groups. But let me not jump ahead. So I will just say that I will let me keep track of the time. What is the time?
You have 19 minutes.
Oh, that's it.
Yes.
Oh God. So then I will not, but I will suggest that you all read it carefully. And that is this point, what I've written the last line here, okay, is a very important method by which you show certain things are homotopic to the identity. Very important method, okay, and it really is the beginning of why the so-called contracted Suslin matrices come into the picture. The contracted Suslin matrices are highly used. Contracted Suslin matrices, since I have not told you what is Suslin matrix, which was what I was going to talk about in my previous talk. But anyway, the contracted Suslin matrices are some completions of the factorial row. Basically some completions. And one can make those completions to be congruent to identity mod some element, if you want to make it. So that is what we did. Something congruent to identity mod t square minus t, we could construct. And using that, we could get a homotopy. Okay. So that is what I have been describing here. So the threefold case comes because you can prove that d plus 1 ax comma x square minus x is the first row of something which is congruent to identity mod x square minus x. Okay. So this was the first step to begin understanding how you get homotopies. I don't think there have been more clear directions in this case of how to get homotopies. But this is a very simple method, so everybody likes it and uses it. So we got that 3a mod E3a is isomorphic to WEA due to our theorem K1 analog, and that is when A is a smooth affine threefold over a field. And here the field was important because it's the same conditions on the field which was there in Suslin's theorem. Okay, all right. Now this is where the question came up in 78, and he asked whether I won't go into the history in between. The history in between is some beautiful result of Mohan Kumar, who said that if you take projective models of rank d minus 2, they may not be free. Okay, Suslin was not sure. He has written, I'm not sure for the size greater than or equal to d plus 1 by 2. He has written that, but in the talk, he had realized, Mohan Kumar had not yet published his results, but Suslin had also realized that d minus 1, he's sure. Okay, but he's not sure below that. He doesn't say that in the talk, but he just says that for rank d minus 1, that is vectors of length d, the rows should be completable. And this he asked over a algebraically closed field. Okay, so he also knew that it would not work over a C1 field. So this was the question in 1983 which Suslin had asked, and following his lead, we did exactly that. Okay, so Suslin's method was cohomology, rank length d plus 1. There he got a smooth curve, and that smooth curve he gave a cohomological interpretation h1 spec c k2, where c is a smooth curve, okay, and that he showed is uniquely divisible. And these ideas of being uniquely divisible were already present in Bas-Milner-Serre, but he gave a cohomological idea of how cohomological interpretation of how to do it. By therefore, you gave the divisibility property. The important divisibility property came out of it. So the idea was very clear. You had to take a object, give it a cohomological interpretation. Cohomology helps you to get exact sequences of all types from which you can get the required thing, that it is divisible. So now I just wanted to make a little discussion on the problem which we are all struggling with right now, and that is to take the A dimension D or algebraically closed field with some divisibility conditions like D factorial and K star, and we want to prove that D is E1 SLD, that S has gone down, E1 SLDA, okay, and we do know it now when A is a smooth algebra or the algebraically closed field. How do you do it when it is not smooth? So I just described a patching argument, okay, how one would do. Now I'll just mention in between that this patching argument is fine, and it did work in a particular case which I shall describe in a short while, but it has a disadvantage. What is the disadvantage? We should always keep it in mind, because whenever there is a disadvantage, it means there is a different approach possible where this disadvantage will not be there. What is the disadvantage? The disadvantage so far is, if you look at Suslin, every time he shows that a factorial rho is in an elementary orbit. Every time he is able to do that. Okay, in all the cases he did the factorial rho, and even in the cases which we from the non-smooth case to the normal case and to the general case, even there one could do it. Always one could get a factorial rho in the orbit of the vector, which is why it was completable. In the case which the patching argument I gave, the patching argument is fine and gives you a completion, but will not give you a factorial rho in the orbit. This is a major, in my mind, major disadvantage. Why is it a major disadvantage? It's a major disadvantage is because basically when you get this factorial rho, if you emphasize that you want to get the factorial rho, then you have reduced the problem to dimension 3. Because if below you can do it, you can always lift it, because you are elementarily getting it a factorial rho. So you can always lift it and above get it, and then it is done. So you are reducing a problem completely to dimension 3, and that is by commutative algebra, okay, or Bertini, whichever you wish. And therefore, in general case, if I don't get it for the singular case, the factorial rho in the orbit, then I cannot proceed to the general case. And that is what has precisely happened now. Right now, we are able to do the dimension 3 case, non-singular, singular, both. Okay. A little bit of cohomology is required, and it comes from some beautiful ideas of Jean Fassel in a different paper. Okay. So what I am saying now is not in the paper which we wrote, because we did not discuss the singular case at that time. But we later on found that what Jean had done actually shows it in the singular case, though of course he didn't realize it because his aim was something quite different in that paper. The Bas-Kuboto theorem was what he was aiming for in affine algebras over two-dimensional. Bas-Kuboto is dimension 1. He was trying to do it for dimension 2. Finally, he could only do it for affine algebras over a finite field. Okay, maybe the algebraic closure of a finite field. You could only do it in that case. Okay, so let us try to do the theorem by that patching argument in dimension 3. Okay, in dimension 3, what happens? D equal to 3. So you get an element in the intersection matrix is SL2 intersection E3. Now this was the brilliant of Jean. He showed that SL2 intersection E3 is the same thing as SL2 intersection ESP4. You see, he was inspired by Suslin in the curve case, showing that SK1 is K1 SP. So symplectic came in. I also thought, let us see in surfaces what happens. Do I get it is stably elementary symplectic? And yes, it is elementary symplectic. Okay. Now, all this is in smooth cases, but in the intersection ring is always smooth. You can arrange that. You can arrange that the intersection ring is smooth. Since you can arrange it smooth, you can get SL2 intersection ESP4. But if it is SL2 intersection ESP4 and it's a two-dimensional ring, then you can say that the matrix is homotopic by the methods I have been talking about. So it is homotopic to the identity. And because it is homotopic, the projective model becomes free. So in arbitrary three-folds, singular case, you can make it okay. All right. So this is how the singular case is done. So the cohomology part of the argument is in showing that SL2 intersection E3 or SL2 intersection EA is the same thing as SL2 intersection ESP4 for a surface, smooth surface over a field of cohomological dimension 1. So this is where the cohomological argument is used, which I'm not getting into. This is in another paper of Fassel, which I can recommend you to read. Okay. So now I have analyzed the smooth case, which we wrote down. Okay. And in the smooth case, basically, I won't go into those things. I only go into the fact that what are we going to do with that width group? Because we are going modulo all but 3 and getting a width group which is smooth. And what are you going to say about that smooth width group? So we want to look at this smooth width group and you want to say it is divisible. If I want to say something is divisible, I need more information about it. Okay. So what we did in that paper is to give it a cohomological interpretation. Following Suslin's idea for the curve helped us to identify what the object would be. So the object was H2 K3, okay, coefficients in K3. And once we had this object, then once you have that, you can always use. So how did we get this object? We used some spectral sequence, okay, Gersten-Grothendieck width spectral sequence was used to get this isomorphism. That is one of the things. According to Fassel, many of these ideas were floating in Europe at that time, but nobody had put it together. See, all this started actually with the work of Marco Schlisting. Marco Schlisting was a student of Karoubi. Karoubi started Hermitian K theory, and Marco Schlisting was the one responsible for starting modern K theory, modern Hermitian K theory. So modern Hermitian K theory involves finding Grothendieck width groups, which are used by us, as we will see later. Okay, the Grothendieck width groups come in the picture, not just the width groups. And how to compute the Grothendieck width groups, they all come into the picture when we do that. So that is what we are heading for now. So what happens is that you can prove using Bloch-Kato and Bloch-Auger spectral sequence again is required to show that this H2 K3 is a divisible group prime to the characteristic. Let me not go into the second approach here. You can read it later. This is the place where I told you, why are we going D minus 3? Why not D minus 2? What Suslin did was up to going D minus, going mod 2, right? Until all but 1, then all but 2. He got a curve, but it was in a bigger size, D plus 1. So therefore he got a curve. But if he had gone 2, and we would get a surface. Why we are not doing with the surface? We had a little difficulty in doing it, but finally we have written it down. Now I have just given a sketch here. Again, similar thing. You get a cohomological interpretation and then prove that the cohomological group is divisible. Okay? And that is what we did show that. Now, Fassel independently had come to this method of using quadratic forms. Okay, I do not quite see the relationship between Fussel's method and this method. I do not quite see it. Okay. Nor do I see the relationship between this method and the next method, which I will be talking about. Okay. But anyway, let me just say that I have written it down here. I suggest you all read it later, leisurely. This is found in Fussel's Duke paper, okay, where these details are given. He came to me with this. He came to me, he had got 4R mod SP4R is the obstruction. He told me it's an obstruction. I said it's not an obstruction. Prove it is 0. Okay, I told him that. He said, why are you so confident? I said, I have just proved 6R mod SP6R is 0 with in a paper with Pratyusha and Rabaya. I have just proved that. And I know 4 is always harder, but this is symplectic. This is not orthogonal. Orthogonal is probably impossible. But in symplectic, it will not be much harder to prove it. And true, within a few days, he came and told me, yes, you are right. It is 0. So that is how the result came. The Duke paper came, that the example was correct. He did, of course, invite me, but I had nothing doing. I'm not going to come for 2 reasons. One is you have done the hard work and done everything. Virtually nothing was left. And second reason is you're doing it the wrong way. I told him this is not the way to do it. And we did it the way I just now described. But I told him that this is also not the right way. Okay, so let us go to the right way. What I think is the right way. Okay, the right way is not to work with the Witt groups. The right way is to work with the relative Witt groups, relative to x square minus x. Okay, this is the way we should study the object. It's easier to, when you've got polynomial rings, the chances of getting divisibility is very high. Okay, so for example, this is how my problem had started. Long before this meeting with Fussell, I had discussed with Swan that this group WERX, x square minus x and R is 2-dimensional. Is it divisible? What happens? Can't we do it the usual way? The usual way means, how do I prove WERX is divisible? The reason is you can do linearization and come to a unipotent. Okay, and that unipotent is divisible, and therefore the whole thing is divisible. That is what you do. But when it's a relative Witt group, can you not do that? So one does find that one can come to a linear to the level of x square minus x. Okay, you can come to something like psi r plus n into x square minus x. But now you cannot conclude that this n is unipotent. N is nilpotent. You cannot conclude that. And Swan actually gave me an example to convince me, which I have written down in these notes. And I suggest you all look at it afterwards. And that completely made us realize that something more has to be done. Okay, so a very vital guidance which he provided in this. So he, like I said, you don't get a unipotent, and therefore you can't get a divisibility condition directly. Okay, so he used coin and such things to show what is happening, and then he showed that you cannot get. But now I told Schwarzschild that our job is to identify this thing. Again, why did this come? RT, T square minus T. You can think of that intersection ring. In that intersection ring, you want to prove something is homotopy to the identity. Then the idea is just to go one step up and get that vector and make that vector complete it to x square minus x, modulo x square minus x, like Vanderkal and I did in our example. So automatically this Witt group comes due to that. Now, how does this Witt group, what can you say about this Witt group? So what one could do is to give it a object name, may not be a homological directly written, but one can get that also. And we could see that it is the Grothendieck Witt group 2,3 of R. When R is a regular ring, no conditions on dimension, with half in R. So you got an object which now was ready for all the spectral sequences in the world, and one could use that. And in the case of a surface, one wanted to know whether this was divisible, and we found yes, it is divisible. And so we could get that this is a bit of spectral sequence concave. I've written it down so you can look at it afterwards. Okay, and one could get that this is a divisible group. Okay, one could get that. One actually did not directly get the whole thing is H2 something, but one got it as two pairs, two subgroups caught in between, both of which are divisible. So that was a bit of work, the main work, and from that one could prove the theorem in what I consider to be one of the correct ways of doing it. Still, it is not good enough because it still doesn't tell you that the factorial row is in the picture. But one could also do that by the fact that the width group of the algebraic threefold smooth is divisible. Okay. Now I only mention this. I don't want to. We have seen that 3 mod E3 being divisible was the key, but Fasil has gone a step further in another paper of his. He has shown that the orbit space, not just 3 mod E3, but D plus 1 mod ED plus 1 of a ring or affine algebra is of over a field of cohomological dimension less than or equal to 1. This is also uniquely divisible. Torsion and uniquely divisible, you can say, are sort of interchangeable. And he has also proved that, but we don't know how to quite use this information. It looks like we have much of the pieces left. Now, very little is left. And so I would encourage a youngster to help us out. Finally, I'll just say one thing. There are one or two things remaining, but I'll say only one thing, and that is topology. When Ashok comes in the picture, topology comes in the picture. Okay? Ashok and Swan are the topologists in our group who guide us by their insights. And Ashok and Fasil did what was done earlier by Pawan and Mohan Kumar and all that by identifying by means of the Chern classes. Okay, they did that question here. Can I give Chern classes and say I can get a unique projective model with those respective classes? So they did that in the case of threefolds, but they don't know what to do in higher dimensions. In the case of threefolds, they classified cohomologically vector bundles on smooth threefolds. I think I'll stop now if it is okay with the organizers. Shall I stop now?
Yeah, this will be a good time to stop, I think.
Yeah, because they can give some time for questions. I did have a couple of more things to say, but I don't want to go into that now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you for this nice talk. And so any question?
Anand Sound is there?
I guess not.
I guess not. Okay. Here he was giving a talk in TIFR, so he was going to have some difficulty in coming back. Yeah.
So,
what about
any
Sagar?
question?
Sarang?
Sarang seems to have left.
Okay. What about Chetan Balve? These are the people who have been working on the problem to some extent. Anand has given a set of 3 lectures on this topic in more details. Yeah, in Germany. Chetan works with him, so they will talk about it quite a bit. And Sarang has taken interest for some time. I don't know anybody else has taken interest in this topic.
So anyone wants to ask a question? Sarang is here, looks like. Yeah. So, Sarang, you have any question? Other than saying...
Nothing right now. Thanks, Ravi.
Okay.
Okay. Let me ask one question, okay? Yeah. I'm a commutative algebraist. Everything is commutative algebra. That's great. But, I mean, this result, does it have any analog in topological cases? I believe we have to think about topological vector bundles. I mean, over the complex, of course. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this result to me still feels like very isolated. Somehow it
it started
out of commutative algebra.
No, in my opinion, it started with Stein manifolds, which is why it was written D plus 3, D plus 2, D plus 2, 3 by 2. That is because in Stein manifolds it is known that vector bundles of rank bigger than D plus 3 by 2, stably trivial are trivial.
So for Stein manifold, it is true for D
It is
plus
true.
rank D plus 2.
D plus 3 by
vector
2.
bundles
D plus 3 by 2.
D plus
is-
3 by 2. I see.
Which is why Suslin's initially reaction was something like that is happening. But then he realized that it's not working like that. It was
Okay.
Stein manifolds which gave the hint. In fact, the proofs are there in analysis.
Yeah,
Lot more
yeah,
functions.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, that half the dimension, I heard that before.
Yeah.
But
That is
anyway,
due to Stein manifolds. Yeah.
still it is D plus 2, I mean, I can understand why things, philosophically speaking, I can understand why it should be true for rank D, okay, then, but then pushing it down to D plus 2 and not below that kind of feels, I feel uncomfortable with that, okay.
No,
But
usually, once we come to the real commutative algebra point, then you will not feel uncomfortable. Why is one pushing oneself to do this? In my opinion, nobody else's, and I don't have one day I'm going to give a talk on that, but right now I'm not in a position to do that. In my opinion, these results are very closely linked to problems which we have been trying long time back, namely Cauchy-Norrie in characteristic 0.
Cauchy-Norrie?
In characteristic 0.
Okay.
In my opinion, I can see reasons why they are related, but I cannot put them together. Okay, just like so many places I could not put things together, even in this talk. They are very closely related. I mean, one is just trying to do a K-theoretic approach to those questions rather than the way it was done. First of all, I tried by doing it by computational commutative algebra, okay, but I did not succeed. I believe still that there may be some method by computational commutative algebra because things are improving a lot in that direction also. And that would be very nice because things would be computerized. Computerized, you could write down the solution. All right. Whereas now I don't think that way. At least I have given up. But I think that at least one should be able to give a guidance. Otherwise, why am I pushing for two things which I feel are very true, but are not obvious to anybody? One is this. But this should be easy because we have already got the smooth case. And the other is something about elementary completion, which was the other talk I was going to give. Elementary completions of polynomial vectors.
So far, my next question is, so far you are talking about stably free is free. I mean, do you have anything for projective models?
Ever since Seshadri, I only talk about unimodular roles. I find that projective models are hard. I have come to the conclusion projective models are hard, and both Raja Sridharan, is he here by the way?
Doesn't look like.
No. So Raja Sridharan and I have both decided to concentrate on unimodular rows because they are hard enough. Okay. We have decided projective models are much harder. Leave it to Mandal.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I compete with myself alone.
No, they are harder. They are harder. You need to know a lot more of various things to study those objects. There are only two people who are doing it. One is Madhav Norrie and one is you. I don't think anybody else is really doing it.
Okay. Yeah. Madhav Norrie doesn't do anything,
Yeah, he does many things. No, he does many things.
Meaning?
He does many things. Whenever I talk to him, I see he has thought about it.
No, I don't mean
Yes,
that. He doesn't do anything about projective models. I mean, if
He doesn't write it down.
He says something, but
yeah, he says something. That is what I mean. That says something is quite massive. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't write. Doesn't do anything.
I'm sure.
He's a massive guy.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay.
Jugal, would you do the last part?
No, so well, I don't see further questions. So I thank Satya for chairing the session and to Ravi Rao for this very enlightening talk, showing us connections to so many interesting objects in geometry and K-theory and Very
Okay.
nice. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Should I close it now or no?
Yeah, you can close it. I don't see further questions. Yeah.
One audience, if